A big, tough monster called Minotaur was defeated by a skilled A-ranked party. People watching everything live cheered for them. In this world, everyone loved the Labyrinth, a place full of exciting secrets and treasures. Later, at a bar, a red mage and alchemist named Yoke Feldio said he was leaving the party. His friends got quiet and then started laughing. Simon Berkeley, the leader of the A-ranked party Thunderpike, said Yoke was holding them back and only let him join because they were childhood friends. Yoke was upset that Simon didn't want to hear his side. Yoke complained that he didn't get paid much for being a red mage in the backline. He had to spend his own money on potions and magic items to help the team. He felt like he was losing out. Simon said Yoke was weak, so that's why he didn't earn much. Then, Barry the Warrior said they didn't need support from Yoke from the start. Jamie the Wizard laughed because Yoke was causing a fuss about how the rewards were shared. Yoke asked Camilla the Priestess, who he supported a lot, for backup, but she just told him not to drag her into the argument. In the end, Yoke gave up and agreed to them. Everyone laughed out loud, saying they could do well without him. Yoke was so speechless that he tried to leave, but Simon stopped him, advising him to apologize for his joke for quitting. Yoke decided to say something and face Simon. He loudly cursed in front of his childhood friend and put up the middle finger. The next day, Yoke became jobless at the age of 20. As a red mage, his main tasks were supporting or odd jobs. For the past 5 years, he worked hard despite not being on the front lines. Just then, he noticed an adventure broadcast but didn't feel like watching it. He realized his dream of becoming an adventurer was getting far away. He calmed himself down and reassured himself that he could still find a job since he had B-rank credibility. However, there were no available solo jobs for a red mage like him. The guild receptionist offered to recommend him for some jobs but still suggested joining a party, though it was rare to accept a red mage. Yoke cried his eyes out, realizing that society disregards red mages to an extent. He was desperate since he was on the verge of losing his budget. Yoke suddenly noticed a stir nearby. A big guy got upset because a girl turned down his offer for a drink. The girl, dressed in armor, kept refusing, which made the guy even angrier. Yoke could tell the guy was bitter. Just then, Mamar, a guild receptionist, showed up. She came out after hearing the commotion and Yoke's situation. She then asked Yoke, the most reliable guy around, to calm things down. She was confident Yoke could take down someone like the angry guy with just one hit. Mamar nudged Yoke forward. Yoke confronted the guy and the muscular man tried to attack him. Our protagonist casually used gravity magic, causing the huge man to fall to the ground. Everyone was surprised. Yoke felt disappointed that the man fell with just one gravity attack. Mamar felt bad because gravity magic was only considered support magic, making Yoke feel hurt again. Yoke had checked on the girls who were bothered by the guy. When he saw the girl in armor, she seemed familiar to him. Suddenly, she called Yoke Master and hugged him, making our protagonist feel flustered. The sword mage Marina laughed and introduced herself. Yoke was surprised because he didn't recognize her at all with her more mature appearance. Then a ranger and elementer named Silk appeared, recognizing her master. She thanked Yoke for saving Marina. Yoke assumed their third companion, Rain the monk and mage, shyly greeted her master. Yoke was glad to see them, and the three excitedly exclaimed that they had already started adventuring. Yoke felt nostalgic since he had been the one to teach them the basics of adventuring. Silk then explained how the commotion started and scolded Marina. Yoke sighed, knowing Marina's personality. While Silk was forcing Marina to apologize to everyone, Rain wondered what Yoke was doing in the guild. He told the girls that he had been looking for a party to join after leaving his previous one. He claimed he was not approved by everyone because he was weak. Silk was surprised since she knew how capable their master was, but Yoke claimed that he couldn't even find a solo job. He knew how challenging it was to find a job as a red mage, and was starting to think of quitting adventuring. The girls were sad to see their master feeling down. All of a sudden, Marina got an idea and invited Yoke to their party, leaving Yoke feeling confused. Marina thought it was the perfect opportunity, but Silk and Rain were getting anxious in their own way. Yoke wondered if it was okay to team up with their former teacher, and Marina happily agreed since he had taught them a lot. However, Yoke thought the girls might not feel comfortable with him around. Just then, Rain, who was usually timid, suddenly said she agreed with Marina. She expressed her desire to be with her former teacher and recalled how considerate Yoke had always been. Yoke, trying to downplay his role, insisted he was just a mere supporter. But unexpectedly, Silk also agreed to let their former teacher join them. She pointed out that there were misunderstandings about red mages, and having a supporter would improve the party's performance. Since they were currently stuck, Silk believed Yoke's help could be beneficial. The usually shy Rain gathered her courage and asked Yoke once again to join their party. She even wondered if he couldn't agree, noting his silence. Yoke had searched for his application and casually burned it with magic, realizing it was already useless. He then bowed his head to the girls and the three of them began celebrating, happy to have their master join them. Silk wondered if it was okay to be part of a low-ranked party like theirs. Yoke assured her that he was grateful because a high-ranked party wouldn't accept him. He expressed his happiness at finding people who valued him. Silk formally welcomed Yoke to their party, and Marina and Rain followed suit. Yoke then requested something from the girls, causing them to worry, thinking it was about his payment. However, Yoke simply asked them to call him Yoke since he was no longer their master. The girls were relieved and happily welcomed him as Yoke. Smiling, Yoke counted on them as his party members. They decided to grab something to eat together. Despite the earlier commotion's mess, Marina calmly enjoyed a hearty meal, causing Silk to become concerned about Yoke's wallet. Yoke pondered the next steps, and Silk informed them about a quest to retrieve magic steel from an abandoned mine. Eager to go since the deadline was approaching, Yoke wished to join to observe their teamwork. Silk planned to check the carriage's arrival time, but Yoke was already aware it would arrive in 3 minutes. The girls became puzzled, questioning how Yoke knew the timing. Yoke explained that as a supporter, memorizing such details was part of the role. The girls were left speechless until Yoke urged them to hurry. Yoke and the girls reached the deserted mines, and our main character felt a sense of nostalgia, even though it was their first time in this maze, just like the girls. They knew they needed magic steel, and Yoke thought they could find it on the 6th floor where it was plentiful. However, Silk told him they couldn't defeat the boss on the 5th floor yet, making it challenging. Yoke suggested mining on the 4th and 5th floors instead. Marina, extending her trap-checking baton, told everyone to set off but accidentally triggered something. Yoke quickly rushed to Marina's rescue, narrowly avoiding the trap. Marina, feeling relieved, thanked Yoke. While Silk scolded Marina, Yoke realized that being the strongest sword mage, Marina should lead and check the ground for traps. Unfortunately, the labyrinth was filled with them. Yoke pulled out a lantern and offered to guide the way. Marina felt confused because Yoke was a red mage meant for the back lines. Yoke explained that he was someone who knew a bit of everything and turned on the lantern. Parts of the walls and floor suddenly glowed, showing where the traps were. It was all thanks to the lantern named Detective Candela, but the girls hadn't heard of such an item before. Yoke then asked Marina to guard the rear since he could also fight. Yoke led the girls like a mother hen through a shortcut to the 4th floor. While Marina was having fun, Silk told Yoke that she would pay for the lantern's oil, but Yoke was fine with it since he could make more with alchemy. After walking through the mines, Yoke stopped and told the girls to get ready for a fight. Suddenly, loud noises came from one of the paths. Monkey-like monsters called Bogles showed up and Silk offered to go first. She quickly grabbed some arrows and shot them at one of the monsters. Marina then rushed forward to attack the Bogles. Yoke was surprised to see Marina taking on 2 of them. He noticed that Marina's longsword had been shortened for easier use. He decided to work harder too and cast 3 buff spells at the same time. Also, Yoke used a spell called Snare to make the Bogles fall over. He told Marina it was her chance. Marina skillfully sliced the monsters in half. Yoke praised Marina for her skills. Marina wondered if Yoke was responsible for her enhanced abilities, but our main character believed it was Marina's own merit. Marina expressed her amazement at feeling stronger than usual, and Yoke clarified that he cast a spell called Physical Enchant. When Marina started to panic, Yoke hushed her and urged her to focus on the upcoming battle. Suddenly, a horde of monsters appeared, former miners now transformed into undead creatures. Yoke quickly summoned Rain, who immediately understood what needed to be done and began casting a spell. Yoke directed Marina and Silk to protect Rain. The 2 girls charged into action, and Yoke surprised everyone by casting various empowering spells on them. To restrain the undead, Yoke also threw magic potions and holy water, causing the monsters to stop in their tracks. Rain, witnessing the effects, was taken aback, but Yoke snapped her out of it. Rain then cast an anti-undead spell, bathing the monsters in a bright light. Slowly, the undead creatures turned into ashes. As the battle ended, Yoke breathed a sigh of relief. He looked around and saw the girls staring at him in silence. Everyone was impressed with how Yoke fought, feeling a powerful boost like sharper senses and using less mana. Yoke downplayed it, saying it wasn't a big deal, but Silk disagreed. She was astonished that Yoke casually tossed away something as valuable as holy water. Yoke explained that he could easily make holy water with alchemy, using an alternative ingredient, ashes of the undead instead of the light crystal. These ashes could also be used to block attacks from behind, preventing ambushes. Silk was left speechless by Yoke's explanations. Rain wondered why she only used a little mana. Yoke explained that he used a spell called Refresh Mana. Rain was shocked because this spell was considered rare, typically only used by red mages. It was an amazing spell that always increased a wizard's chance of winning in battles. Yoke said it was hard to learn, but he downplayed it, saying his experience with Thunderpike was different, because they didn't care about his supporting role. The girls were amazed at how calm and collected Yoke was. Our protagonist explained that his 5 years of being an adventurer helped him stay calm for everyone's sake. He believed it was crucial not to make others anxious. The former students were surprised and admired Yoke for this new insight from their former master. They expressed their surprise and admiration as they continued on their mission. Shortly after, the party reached the stairs and started mining on the 4th floor. Yoke had played a crucial role in their progress, so the girls turned to him for guidance. Yoke proposed a break, but the girls hesitated, concerned about having cold and tough food in the gloomy labyrinth. To their surprise, Yoke pulled out a pot and promised to serve them hot food. Initially stunned, the girls soon shared their amazement that enjoying warm food was even possible in the labyrinth. Yoke had reassured the anxious girls that he had acquired the pot and instructed them to observe closely. He gently tapped the empty pot with a ladle, and to the girls' amazement, soup magically began to fill it. Witnessing this, the girls were astonished. Yoke then opened a small drawer containing utensils, ingredients, and condiments. He ignited the stove, proceeding to cook eggs and bacon. Once the meal was ready, he served it to the hungry girls. Although the girls were impressed, they hesitated to eat the soup, expressing concern. Yoke assumed it would be seafood this time and assured them that he had been using the tool without encountering any strange tastes so far. Marina, taking a sip, was pleasantly surprised by the warm soup. She remarked that it tasted rich. Silk and Rain also sampled it and confirmed that it was clam chowder. Marina couldn't help but wonder if she was dreaming as she found herself enjoying warm food within the labyrinth. Yoke had explained that he used a tool called soup stock, which he had acquired from a ruins and fixed up. However, every time it was used, it produced a random soup. Rain, a mage, became more interested, but Yoke wondered if she had dwarf blood, given her fascination with magical items. Silk then mentioned that there was magic power in the food. Yoke praised her magical intuition and clarified that cooking was similar to alchemy. Silk then questioned whether Yoke used magic power as an ingredient, realizing the innovative nature of his cooking. Rain advised her to stop overthinking and just go with the flow, an unconventional approach for a mage. Everyone had finished their meal and thanked Yoke. Being supportive, Yoke requested the girls' equipment for a maintenance check. The equipment was laid out, and the girls observed their master thoroughly inspecting everything. Silk wondered if it was necessary to be so thorough and memorize their equipment. Yoke explained that it was his responsibility as a support. He reminded them that they would start mining on the next floor, and the stairs were a safe area where monsters didn't appear, providing a place for them to rest. Silk finally understood why Yoke had chosen the stairs. Suddenly, Marina questioned why Yoke was so serious about everything. She mentioned that she had never seen a supporter so aware of the entire party's equipment and carriage schedule. Yoke explained that it was because he was a Red Mage and needed to put in extra effort. The girls were impressed, seeing Yoke as a hardworking person. Yoke could sense that the girls were curious about his motivation for working so hard, and surprisingly, he revealed that it was for his dream. He asked the curious girls not to laugh and shared that his dream was to conquer the world's top labyrinth called Achromatic Darkness. Rain had suddenly spat out her drink, insisting she wasn't laughing. Yoke understood her reaction. The labyrinth they discussed was one of the Abyss Gates, the deepest and most perilous. Rain had heard these gates were like portals to another world, making her curious if Yoke desired to venture there. However, Yoke clarified he only sought to witness the end of the world. After a brief silence, Rain remarked that Yoke's dream suited him. Out of the blue, Marina offered to assist Yoke in achieving his dream. Initially surprised, Yoke explained it was a personal wish, but Marina argued he couldn't navigate the labyrinth alone, emphasizing the strict requirements of A-ranked or above parties. Yoke questioned her motivation, and Marina responded with a rather unexpected reason. It sounded romantic. Rain chimed in, agreeing that the bigger the goal, the more passionate one becomes. Worried, Yoke turned to the mature Silk, hoping she would intervene. However, Silk surprised him by expressing her desire for an exciting adventure like that as well. Yoke was left speechless, and the girls reached a consensus. Our protagonist could only sigh. He claimed it was an unrealistic dream, but the girls knew he was up for it. Suddenly, Marina suggested making a name for their team, making Yoke surprised that they were still a nameless party. Silk then wondered if she got an idea, and Marina excitedly named themselves Clover, since Yoke was their lucky fourth leaf. Rain and Silk quickly agreed, and Marina asked for Yoke's opinion. Yoke was silent the whole time due to happiness overload and embarrassment. He shyly claimed that he was happy, and Marina officially announced that Clover was founded and their goal was the Abyss Gate. The girls looked at their former master, who was happy to be with them. As they pumped themselves up to continue their mission on the fourth floor, the labyrinth suddenly experienced an earthquake. The tremor was the signal of the appearance of the mining point, where a huge lizard appeared. The lizard used to be a D-rank monster named Rock Lizard. While Yoke and the girls were hiding and observing its enormous size, the monster noticed them. Yoke realized he had to take action and ran away to divert the rock lizard's attention. Even though the girls told him to come back, Yoke used two spells, Chain and Slow, simultaneously. Rain was surprised to see a double quick cast, but Silk explained that these were just support magic spells. The rock lizard charged towards Yoke but abruptly stopped right in front of him. Initially, the girls thought the monster had stopped, but it was actually moving very slowly, essentially creating a time-stopping effect. Yoke instructed Marina to attack. Continuously using the two spells on the massive monster, Yoke remembered that its skin was tough for beginners to break. However, Clover had Marina, a sword mage capable of easily slicing through the rock lizard's skin. Marina's special ability, Magic Blade, coated her weapon with mana, enhancing its attack power. It was a rare class, and Yoke was impressed to see the lizard's head fall off. Marina celebrated and quickly moved to retrieve the magic steel. At that moment, Yoke lifted her, causing Marina to become flustered. Yoke put her down and explained that Magic Blade consumed a lot of strength and mana. He asked the girls to take care of Marina while he collected the magic steel. Silk then stared at the flustered Marina. Yoke approached the huge lizard and brought out a magic item called the Wrecking Pickaxe. He mined the ores stuck on the monster and collected a significant amount of silver, copper, and magic steel. Meanwhile, Marina was lost in thought. Silk couldn't help but notice Marina turning red and asked her why. Marina simply said it was for no reason at all. Silk then wondered if Marina was feeling shy, suggesting that her heart might be fluttering from Yoke's hug. Silk playfully teased Marina, suggesting that she might have a crush. Marina quickly defended herself, pointing out that Silk had a similar reaction when Yoke complimented her archery skills. The banter continued until Rain joined the conversation. Surprisingly, Rain admitted that she too felt flustered when Yoke protected her in battle. Silk and Marina were taken aback, not expecting Rain to share something embarrassing. Rain clarified that they weren't hiding their feelings. Silk and Marina insisted that Yoke was just admirable, like a prince, and Rain agreed. Just as they were engrossed in the conversation, Yoke returned and asked what they were talking about. The girls fell silent, blushing like red beets. Silk attempted to act normal, but her face turned red and she couldn't stop shaking. Marina insisted they were just exercising, but it was a weak excuse. They sought Rain's assistance only to find that the mage was the most flustered of them all. Trying to shift the focus, the girls offered to help with mining, but Yoke revealed he had already gathered everything. The girls were curious about Yoke's efficiency, and he credited it his experience. With the insufficient magic steel, Silk suggested taking down another rock lizard. Yoke questioned if Marina was up for it while looking at her red face. Despite being flustered, Marina insisted she was fine and tried to snap Rain out of her embarrassment. With no response, Marina simply declared that they should move on. The group had reached the entrance to the boss room without running into another rock lizard. They debated whether to venture further, but Silk felt uneasy about it. Then decided they should proceed to the 6th floor. However, they had to deal with the boss monster on the 5th floor, also known as the Novice Killer, first. Yoke listened to the girls' concerns about facing it, but he reassured them that their party could handle it. With confidence, he assured the girls that he would give his all to defeat the boss and demonstrate his usefulness to the team. The girls hesitated for a moment, stating that Yoke had already proven himself. Encouraged by their master's confidence, Silk asked Yoke to stay determined and not to lose. With everyone's agreement, Yoke took something out of his bag and told them to get ready for a battle. Marina was really surprised when she saw GoPro-kun, a magic item that automatically records. Impressively, Yoke had the flying version. Marina wondered if their fight would be recorded, but Yoke just wanted to keep a record. Marina then suggested that Yoke should broadcast their fight because it sounded like fun. Yoke was nervous about showing his face as he hadn't been able to do it properly with his previous party. Marina pointed out that broadcasting was beneficial for parties. Yoke somewhat agreed, considering Adventure Broadcast was the world's largest platform for adventure content, featuring raids with commentary, item reviews, cooking shows, and potion-making processes. Adventurers basically became celebrities and gained fame and wealth. Yoke didn't really want to become a celebrity, but advertising themselves to get a few more quests exclusive to Clover was something he hoped. Yoke had asserted that putting in maximum effort wouldn't change things, as gaining views was not an impossible task. Determined, he activated GoPro-kun for the broadcast, casting 3 support spells: Great Haste, Blink Shadow, and Protect Shade. On himself, he opened the door where the 5th floor boss awaited. Yoke proudly announced Clover's inaugural adventure broadcast. They had searched for the boss monster, but it loomed in front of them, a massive crab named Steel Crab. Without warning, it swiftly charged towards them. Yoke instructed the girls not to panic and guided them on where to attack. Yoke then cast not 1, not 2, but 6 spells to weaken the enemy. The steel crab stopped in its tracks, and Rain was astonished to witness a multi-quick cast. Yoke decided to conclude his chain of spells with gravity. The steel crab collapsed to the ground, shaking the earth beneath them. The girls, surprised, hid behind Yoke. Yoke told them it was their chance to attack since the monster was now crippled. However, as he checked on the steel crab, he noticed something that made him break into a cold sweat. He claimed that he accidentally defeated the boss monster on his own. Marina jumped in, calling Yoke fantastic while on top of him, and Rain mentioned that double quick cast was already impressive, but Yoke casually performed many of them. Yoke confirmed he used 6, causing Rain a headache. Silk wondered how Yoke managed to one-shot the boss monster when they were all supposed to be support magic users. Yoke explained that he used Paralyze, Slow, and Chain to stop the monster's movements, Blindness to prevent surprise attacks, venom to weaken its strength, and collapse to make its joints prone to breaking. Gravity was the finishing move, used only to make the monster fall to the ground. Yoke apologized, thinking he would only deal some damage as support, but the girls were delighted by the spectacle and showered Yoke with compliments. Yoke, suddenly embarrassed, told them to celebrate later. It seemed someone was weak to compliments. Yoke then explained that the allure of labyrinths lay in the treasures they yielded. They proceeded to unlock the treasure chest dropped by the boss monster. Upon opening it, their eyes widened at the sight of numerous ores and top-notch ingots. Silk also spotted a good amount of magic steel, marking the fulfillment of their mission. Silk felt relieved, while Rain was preoccupied searching for rare magic items. Marina, on the other hand, sought confirmation on whether they could exchange the treasures for money. Yoke affirmed, and Marina rejoiced. It was clear what she desired. Yes, she was hungry. Meanwhile, at the Finesse Adventurers Guild, a ranger and thief named Cork was griping about being a member of the Thunderpike party led by Simon. He moaned about how the party had been too demanding, and he even called their abilities a mistake from the start. Barry labeled Cork as a coward right after they gave him the tasks that Yoke used to handle. Jamie chimed in, mentioning that they had been struggling lately since Yoke was no longer with them, and started to say something more. Simon banged the table, emphatically instructing everyone not to mention Yoke's name. He clicked his tongue and cursed at Yoke. What happened to Thunder Pike? A few hours ago, on the 4th floor of a certain maze, the whole team was surrounded by direwolves. Simon got frustrated when he saw more monsters than usual. While Barry was fighting some of the wolves, he mentioned how strong the monsters had become, surviving his attacks. Simon was confused, recalling that they had gone to the same maze many times before and even reached the 10th floor, but this time, they were stuck on the 4th floor. Simon and Barry blamed the newcomer Cork for dragging them down. Cork then explained that he tried to stop them, but the two overconfident guys didn't listen. He called them stupid for not bringing beast repellents, which Simon didn't know about. Cork clarified that dire wolves would gather after tracing their smell, and using beast repellent to erase their scent on the way was common knowledge. He assumed that Thunderpike, their regular group, had some, as they always went to the same maze. While they argued, a dire wolf suddenly attacked Jamie. The poor mage was tossed around like a toy, and Barry and Simon rushed to save her. Simon checked on her and found her battered, with her clothes falling off. Simon asked Camilla for healing, but she was out of mana. Simon pushed her aside and attacked more incoming direwolves, thinking he had taken them down in one shot, but they were still standing, looking okay. He was shocked because normally the wolves would die instantly. Cork asked what Simon was talking about, explaining that it's tough to deal critical damage to direwolves, and suggested they should have at least used a physical enchant potion even if no one was supporting. Cork then recommended running toward a safe path he had discovered. Everyone took a break on a nearby staircase. Despite attempts to wake up Jamie, she remained unconscious from the wolves' critical attack. Simon instructed Camilla to use a potion to replenish her mana so she could cast healing magic on Jamie, but they discovered the potion had run out. Simon, puzzled because they always had enough mana potions before, questioned the others. Barry said it was a porter's responsibility to keep them supplied. Cork offered one, and Simon hastily applied it to Jamie. Cork then reminded them to pay for the supplies he provided. Simon got upset with Cork's attitude, especially when someone's life was at stake. Cork lectured Simon, emphasizing that as the leader, it was his responsibility to ensure the well-being of all members. He noticed Simon lacked knowledge, strategy, and preparation for their journey, questioning how Simon became the leader of an A-rank party. Simon, angered by the lecture, blamed Cork for everything, but Cork argued that Simon lacked knowledge. The two continued arguing, exchanging insults until Cork decided to leave the Thunderpike party the next day. That night, the Clover group enjoyed a relaxed dinner at a tavern. Yoke, the leader, received thanks from the girls and they began praising him. Yoke, feeling shy, blushed as Rain encouraged him to try some of the food. Silk and Marina followed suit, putting a lot of different dishes in front of Yoke. The girls playfully competed to see who could offer the best. Watching Yoke tremble, the girls wondered if he was worried about finishing all the food. To their surprise, Yoke wasn't worried. He was genuinely happy. Tears welled up in his eyes as he expressed gratitude. It was the first time he had been treated so kindly. Suddenly, Yoke remembered that he was the girl's master and should not let compliments get to his head. Trying to regain his composure, he aimed to act mature and courteous. Silk noticed his attempt and reminded him not to be too formal in front of them. She suggested that since the girls followed Yoke's guidance, he should officially become the leader of the Clover party. Yoke felt surprised when Silk suggested that he should be their leader. Silk mentioned that they were initially troubled without a leader, but Yoke arrived at the right moment, attributing it to the guidance of the spirits. Yoke attempted to rationalize the situation, but the girls quickly agreed, stating that he seemed more like a leader than any of them. Despite Yoke insisting that he had just joined them, Marina excitedly announced the official founding of the Clover Party. Yoke couldn't find words, his concern growing as he observed how easily the girls placed their trust in others. Taking care of them, Yoke believed, was a leader's responsibility, and among them, he had the most experience. Eventually, Yoke reluctantly agreed and the girls celebrated. Yoke, as the leader, began distributing rewards but wanted to know how Silk had been handling it before he arrived. Silk said she had been managing everything on her own, giving only the necessary allowance to others. When Yoke asked for more details, Silk got worried that she might be doing something wrong. Yoke reassured her, saying it was for their dream, and he supported her efforts. This made Silk feel a bit flustered. Yoke then inquired about their days off, and Silk confirmed they had 2 days per week. Yoke praised her for being considerate. During the conversation, Silk unconsciously referred to Yoke as Master, which Rain pointed out. Marina then asked how Yoke spent his days off, and he explained that he usually bought supplies, especially the ingredients for his holy water. The girls became quiet when they heard his answer, and quickly they began praising him. Marina casually mentioned she wanted to join Yoke at the market. Silk and Rain thought it sounded like a date and said they wanted to come too. Yoke asked them to wait and questioned what if he was a bad guy who might take advantage of them. Marina argued that no bad guy would give a warning like that. Yoke sort of agreed. As Yoke stood up to set up an account for their party's savings, the people inside the tavern got really excited. Marina found it unusual to see everyone so hyped up and pulled Yoke over the commotion. Yoke's eyes widened as he watched the commentators shouting when they saw a multi-quick cast. It was Yoke who had executed the 6 spells against the huge steel crab and ended it with gravity. The crowd got excited watching a Red Mage solo kill a boss. Yoke and the girls just stood there looking surprised as the commentators praised the Clover Party. The girls were thrilled to see thousands of views and people watching them, including newbies. The girls hugged Yoke, and Rain told him to redo the celebration. The entire party kicked off another celebration complete with drinks. Yoke realized it all happened because of the girls. As a not-so-skilled Red Mage, he only got into the party because he personally knew the girls. Yoke expressed his gratitude to the girls, but they got confused because they thought they should be thanking him. Yoke quietly chuckled about it and decided to thank them again another day. He resolved to become stronger for the girls. The night went on, with the Clover Party finishing their drinks. 3 days earlier, Yoke had been staring intently at the request board, contemplating which task to choose for their upcoming party. At that moment, Mamar approached and inquired if everything was all right. Mamar confidently asserted that the Clover Party could effortlessly handle quests with substantial rewards. However, Yoke was more interested in selecting a quest that would provide valuable experience for the group. Observing Yoke's seriousness, Mamar couldn't help but chuckle at how Yoke was taking on the role of a master. Yoke jokingly asked Mamar to refrain from teasing, and in response, Mamar presented a quest specifically for the esteemed Yoke. It turned out to be a C-ranked mission involving the delivery of some pebbles from the Yonman waterfall. Yoke was taken aback, considering that gathering quests were typically classified as D-ranked. Mamar explained that there were extenuating circumstances. Yoke remembered that the Yeoman waterfall was close to Orden Lake, an area suitable for novice adventurers. In brief, the pebbles were essential materials for creating light sources and magic items. Putting the pieces together, Yoke deduced that there was an unusual event occurring in the lakeside forest of Ordan Lake. Mamar confirmed Yoke's suspicion, revealing that a massive demon beast was lurking there, elevating the quest's difficulty by 1 rank. But Mamar was sure that dealing with a demon beast wouldn't be a big problem for Yoke. Yoke couldn't help but feel that the quests Mamar suggested were a bit strange. He wondered if he could take on the quest, even though it wasn't allowed. Mamar acted like she didn't see anything wrong. As Yoke was thanking Mamar, his girls walked in wearing their casual clothes. Yoke then said he found a suitable quest. Without much discussion, the girls quickly agreed. Mamar hurried to finish the procedure. Yoke wondered if everything was okay. He informed them about the demon beast, but the girls were fine with it. They believed it would give them more credibility, especially since Yoke would be with them. Yoke told the girls to get ready in an hour. When Mamar returned with the confirmation note, Yoke realized she had planned to give them the quest from the start. Mamar was excited because it would be great to watch a demon beast on a live broadcast with Yoke subduing it. She even brought out some baby fireworks and congratulated Yoke for reaching 10,000 views on their Steel Crab live broadcast. Mamar was thrilled and happy that Yoke, who had been unlucky before, was now gaining recognition. It felt like her son was finally being acknowledged, surprising Yoke. She made it clear that she was more of a mother figure than a romantic interest. Yoke couldn't believe that they were getting a lot of views, and Mamar confirmed that people were eagerly waiting for the next installment. With a disappointed expression, Mamar talked about Yoke's former comrades. She mentioned that the newcomer to Thunderpike had left after just 1 day, and seemed to struggle with quests. She warned Yoke to be careful, emphasizing that they didn't know what people might do when they hit rock bottom. Despite leaving the party, Mamar insisted that Yoke was still not safe. Yoke fully understood Mamar's concern and thanked her. Shortly afterward, Yoke left the Adventurers Guild to prepare for the upcoming quest. Unbeknownst to him, a shady figure was stalking him with a fiery glare. Yoke kept walking and the suspicious person followed. Yoke stopped to check the time, realizing it was getting late. He needed to meet the girls. He wondered why the person was following him so clumsily. Thinking that Thunder Pike might have sent them, Yoke decided to confront the person by leading them to a nearby corner. Curious about what the E-ranked adventurer named Veggio wanted, Yoke asked. Veggio tried to confirm if he was Yoke, and Yoke denied it. In a hurry, Yoke asked Veggio to keep the conversation short. Frustrated, Veggio ordered Yoke to leave his party, accusing him of repeatedly approaching the girls. He wondered how Yoke managed to be with them. It dawned on Yoke that Veggio was the one stalking his girls. Veggio drew his sword, threatening Yoke to stay away from the girls. However, Yoke quickly used Snare and Sleep Mist, causing Veggio to fall to the ground. Onlookers assumed he fell due to intoxication, giving Yoke the chance to leave the area. Shortly afterward, Yoke caught up with the girls in the carriage. He shared with them that he had encountered their stalkers, specifically the chubby man. Silk informed their master that Veggio had persistently asked to join them many times. She added that it would have been okay if Veggio were strong, but he was only an E rank, and to make matters stranger, a bit odd. Yoke then recounted an encounter where Veggio unsheathed a sword in front of him. This made the girls concerned for Yoke, but he assured them that nothing dangerous had transpired. Yoke was just relieved that Veggio hadn't done anything peculiar to the girls. Rain had been impressed by how mature Yoke was despite being the same age. Yoke in turn was shocked to find out they were of the same age. Initially, Yoke had thought Silk was the eldest, but it turned out Silk was only 17, just like Marina. Yoke was surprised to learn that Rain, who looked the most childish, was actually the eldest. Rain, sensing Yoke's thoughts, wondered if Yoke was thinking that her body was underdeveloped. This made Yoke start apologizing. Upon reaching their destination, Marina noticed a giant tree beside a clear lake, the lakeside forest of Orden. Yoke then reminded everyone to focus on the quest. Marina began to wonder if the demon beast was real, as the area had been peaceful just 2 months ago. She recalled that not a single monster, not even a normal animal, had been seen since then. Yoke explained that the situation was bad. He pointed out that animal senses were more sensitive than humans, and considering Orden's reputation for abundant wildlife, there might be something extremely dangerous lurking in the area. Yoke urged the girls to stay sharp, emphasizing that their target might be a huge demon beast. Orden Lake used to get its water from an ancient dungeon's groundwater. Deep inside this dungeon, there was a magical item that kept water flowing endlessly without ever drying up. What was once a peaceful location turned into something dark and murky. When the Clover Party, led by Yoke, arrived, they brought along GoPro-kun to document everything. Yoke planned to switch to live broadcasting if they encountered the demon beast. The girls were curious and asked why. Yoke explained that this way, the guild could be informed and they might receive support. Additionally, Yoke wanted to capture live footage of the demon beast as proof in case they managed to defeat it. Rain expressed concern about the expense of GoPro-kun. Yoke reassured them, pointing out that Orden Lake was a spot for newcomers who didn't have broadcasting equipment. This explains why there was little information about the demon beast. Despite the reports, Marina wondered why there was no information about it since adventurers had come to the same area. Yoke then assumed that they were simply not able to return alive after encountering the demon beast. The girls got scared, but Yoke told them not to worry since it was only an assumption, and no high-ranked demon beasts had been seen yet in Orden. Yoke claimed he would do his best to support the girls. He then cast Sneaking Move, a spell to make the target move stealthily on everyone. Yoke then added Blink Shadow on himself. It could only be applied to the caster and could negate an attack once. He decided to stay in the rearguard to check for surprise attacks. He told the girls that they were skilled enough and just needed experience and swore to support them well. He claimed that Clover would be fine. The girls finally felt motivated and everyone went on their way. The group explored the area, marveling at the beautiful scenery. However, Silk noticed strange fluctuations in the magic around them. Rain and Marina realized there were no signs of animals nearby. Yoke was grateful that the girls were perceptive about their surroundings. Just when everything seemed fine, a loud and ominous sound interrupted the tranquility. It hushed as they turned toward its source. The girls wondered if it was just a tree falling. While observing a nearby boulder, Yoke sensed something amiss. He warned everyone to be cautious about something behind them. Yoke swiftly moved to shield the girls just as something narrowly missed them. Worried, Yoke clicked his tongue and investigated. His eyes widened with fear as a massive horse-like monster emerged. A B-ranked creature named Zarnag, a high-ranking monster from the northernmost wastelands. Yoke found the situation unpredictable. It was unusual for such a monster to appear in Orden. He knew this was a formidable opponent, but he believed Clover could handle it. Yoke quickly switched Gopro-kun into live broadcast mode and told the girls to retreat right away. He ordered them to report to the guild and assured them that he would handle the monster, allowing them to escape safely. Marina questioned if the monster was truly dangerous, and Yoke explained that it was a high-ranked creature, even challenging the formidable Thunderpike. This monster was Zarnag, the Beast King of the North Pole. Silk couldn't understand why Zarnag had come to Orden, but Yoke instructed her to take charge as the leader and lead the retreat to safety. The girls then realized that Yoke was sacrificing himself for them. Yoke emphasized that the monster was intelligent enough to analyze their moves and urged the girls to escape while they still had the chance. Silk fell silent, overwhelmed with fear at the prospect of Yoke sacrificing himself in the face of such a formidable foe. At that moment, Marina calmly drew her sword. She didn't want to leave. Yoke tried talking to her, but Marina reminded him that he was in the backline, and someone like her, a frontline fighter, should be the one diverting the enemy's attention. Rain and Silk stepped up too, suggesting that they should team up to take down the monster. Yoke warned them that the monster was too dangerous, but Marina argued that it was just as perilous for him. She added that it was too late. The monster was already approaching. Silk shot an arrow, but the monster vanished quickly. Yoke realized it was targeting Marina, so he cast protection spells on her twice. The monster tackled Marina, sending her flying. The attack happened so fast that Marina would have died if it weren't for Yoke. Zarnag then charged at Marina as if about to devour her. Just in time, Yoke used a scroll of rock breaking, saving Marina from the monster. It was a close call. Marina apologized, but Yoke reassured her that it was okay since the wide-ranging magic spell had hit the monster. Yoke started feeling anxious because he was running low on magic scrolls, and debuff spells weren't effective against high-level monsters. At that moment, Silk informed Yoke about her plan to seek assistance from the Dryads. Behind her, branches sprouted, carrying boulders ready to be thrown. The branches launched the boulders at the Zarnag, but the monster effortlessly dodged every one of them. Despite the misses, Yoke encouraged Silk to persist. Yoke then cast 6 debuff spells, similar to those he used against the Steel Crab, on the Zarnag. However, the monster quickly shrugged off all the debuffs. Nevertheless, one of the boulders managed to hit Zarnag, showing some effectiveness from the debuffs. Yoke, recognizing this, signaled Rain to take her turn. Rain cast one of her most potent spells, a 5th grade magic known as Thunderbolt. The lightning struck the monster, causing it to explode. The girls questioned the effectiveness of the attack, considering Rain had invested all her mana in it. Yoke, aware of Zarnag's cunning, anticipated that Rain's attack would have at least heavily damaged it. However, to Yoke's shock, he discovered that Zarnag didn't have a scratch on it. Realizing its overwhelming strength, Yoke pondered if the demon beast might be a named monster. Seeing that Zarnag looked fine, Silk couldn't help but feel devastated. It was obviously too strong for them to handle. Despite being scared, Silk continued using the nearby branches to attack, but Zarnag casually flung them aside. It even got the chance to counter, but Yoke was there to save Silk using his Blink Shadow. Yoke then checked on Silk, who claimed that she was fine, but it was clear that she was shaken. The situation was dire, with Silk scared and Marina injured. Bottles scattered as Rain had just finished recovering her mana. She asked them to buy her some time since it was the only way. Yoke was worried because Rain's previous all-out attack had been useless against Zarnag. Betting everything on the same attack was too risky, and Yoke wondered if there was anything they could do. He then resolved himself and bet everything on the magic that he secretly possessed. Yoke used a scroll of light shield to protect the girls. He requested Silk and Rain to distract and restrain the monster, even if just for a brief moment. Marina was advised to conserve her stamina for the final strike using her magic blade. Yoke assured the girls that he would come up with a solution and encouraged them not to give up. Silk, displaying a bright expression, agreed, bringing relief to Yoke. Yoke then activated an incredibly large magic circle, reminding himself not to hesitate, as this particular magic was their only hope in this dire situation. It wasn't a complete spell yet, as it involved a combination of all the spells he knew. Silk instructed Marina to prepare, and with the assistance of the Dryads, Marina went all out. Zarnag was temporarily bound by the branches, providing Marina with an opportunity to attack. However, even in that restrained state, Zarnag managed to dodge and create some distance. Rain completed her spell, encasing Zarnag in a powerful ice coffin. Silk, utilizing the Dryads, helped hold the ice coffin in place. The girls signaled to Yoke that it was the perfect moment. Yoke then unleashed a 5th grade magic known as Prismic Magic. It was the last chance the girls had given him, and Yoke hoped that this powerful attack would be enough to bring down Zarnag. The girls watched as Zarnag got hit by Yoke's spell. Surprisingly, it continued to move forward as if nothing had happened. Just when everyone thought they were defeated, Zarnag began tearing up and foaming at the mouth. Rain and Silk were confused about what was happening, and Yoke instructed Marina to take action. Marina drew her magic blade, acknowledging that they would have perished without Yoke's help. The rest of the group, including the other girls and Yoke, encouraged Marina, knowing that they couldn't face Zarnag individually. Despite this, Marina achieved victory for the team by slicing Zarnag's thick neck in one powerful stroke. Zarnag's head flew off and rolled to the ground. Yoke knelt down, realizing they had won. Silk and Rain hugged him tightly, with Marina joining in. Yoke noticed the girls were unusually quiet during the embrace, but he hugged them back, concluding the raid in an emotionally charged silence. 2 days earlier, the Clover Party had returned to the Adventurers Guild without any problems. They became famous after successfully subduing Zarnag, a feat that was broadcasted live. Silk found it surprising that they were getting attention now, and Rain felt proud that Yoke's true power was witnessed by everyone. However, Yoke wasn't comfortable with all the attention he was receiving. The girls encouraged him to be more confident, assuring him that he was incredible enough to use an original spell. This revelation surprised Marina, who had been asleep when Yoke explained the magic he used. Amazed, she wondered how it worked. Yoke then explained that he simply combined alchemy with various types of magic, including various status ailments and debuffs simultaneously. Rain, as a mage, was impressed, noting that multicasting could combine multiple spells into one. Suddenly, Yoke's expression went blank and Rain noticed. Yoke had made a mistake, unintentionally revealing his true feelings on his face. Rain asked him to share whatever was on his mind. Yoke smiled, realizing that Rain could see through him. He had been trying to keep silent about the spell, but as he began to explain, Benwood, the guildmaster, appeared. The girls were scared by his imposing presence. Benwood wanted a private conversation with Yoke and asked the others to follow. Yoke had a sense of foreboding about it. Later, at the guildmaster's office, Benwood and Mamar greeted them to discuss their recent quest. Benwood happily praised everyone for defeating Zarnag, but oddly, he specifically praised Yoke without clear reasons. This made everyone uneasy. He then brought up the live broadcast where people saw Yoke's unique spell, one that hadn't been officially recognized. If the Royal Academy deemed it forbidden, Yoke could face serious charges. The girls passionately defended Yoke, insisting that he use the spell to save them. Benwood urged them to calm down, emphasizing that it was only a possibility. He then stood up, apologized for getting the Clover Party into trouble, and assured them that he would take full responsibility. He mentioned that he had already received a positive response from the Royal Academy. At that moment, Mamar apologized as well, admitting that she was the one who assigned them the quest. The girls were surprised to see experienced adventurers apologizing to them, and insisted that it was all thanks to Yoke. They urged the veterans to lift their heads. Benwood and Mamar then expressed their gratitude. Benwood, looking at the girls, complimented Yoke on having excellent disciples. Yoke grinned, expressing his pride in them. Benwood agreed and recalled the Royal Academy's response. The message stated that the spell's widespread use was prohibited, but since it was evident in the broadcast that Yoke hadn't violated any rules, he was not guilty. Benwood clarified that the magic would be exclusive to Yoke alone. Upon hearing the news, the girls celebrated, but Benwood cautioned them not to celebrate too early. He went on to recognize each girl's individual performance during the raid and announced their promotion to C rank. The girls were elated by this great news. Yoke, on the other hand, achieved even higher recognition, being promoted to A rank after showcasing his original magic against Zarnag. The girls were even more excited than Yoke upon learning this. Yoke, initially speechless, eventually laughed it off. Benwood was surprised by Yoke's subdued reaction to achieving the rank he had always desired. Yoke explained that it was too sudden for him. Benwood smiled, congratulated Yoke, and reminded him that he was now an A-rank adventurer. Shortly after, Mamar presented their rewards, and Silk pondered whether it was okay to accept them all. Mamar clarified that the quest had now reached a B-ranked status, and because their party had brought back Zarnag's body intact, the money in front of them was a reasonable reward. Benwood then spoke up, offering a personal reward of 1 platinum coin, a premium in the kingdom. He presented it as an apology, surprising the girls with the generous amount. Benwood claimed it was mere pocket change for him as a guildmaster. Marina wondered about its value, and Mamar explained that it equaled 100 bills. Silk, upon hearing this, exclaimed that they had already achieved their goal of buying their own base. The girls celebrated and Yoke congratulated them. In that moment, Silk questioned whether it was appropriate to be rewarded with such a significant amount. She felt uneasy about achieving their goal so easily. Yoke reassured her, urging her not to be formal and emphasizing his full support for their dreams as a fellow party member. Silk warmly agreed, but the veterans playfully teased them about being a great team. Despite Yoke's attempt to clarify that there was nothing romantic between him and the girls, Benwood jokingly told them to leave, and the girls playfully dragged Yoke away. Benwood had watched the Clover Party leave from his office. He found it amusing that teasing Yoke was still so effortless. Mamar had cautioned Benwood about going too far, but the guildmaster argued that Mamar was even more relentless in teasing. Then their conversation took a serious turn as they discussed a named monster that had unexpectedly appeared in Orden. Benwood anticipated an overflow occurring. Even more concerning, a stampede might be on the horizon. A month ago a show aired, and it was about the Clover Party. Everyone was excited to see the team take on a monster named Lefty Hand. The commentators praised Yoke a lot, calling him the leader of the party. As they talked about Yoke's fast multicast skills, a man at a table started shaking with anger. There was a loud slam on the table and people found out it was Simon from Yoke's old group. Simon was frustrated to see Yoke become A-ranked, with everyone cheering for him. He didn't understand why people found it interesting to watch the Clover Party defeat low-floor bosses. Simon thought they were all foolish. He was also upset that more adventurers were becoming weak. Thunder Pike, his current, always lacked members and kept failing their quests. Because of this, a sponsor decided to stop supporting them. Simon tried recruiting official members for Thunder Pike, but no one stayed, and he blamed Yoke for their misfortune. Barry then accused Yoke of being arrogant, and Simon couldn't believe they were the ones suffering. Suddenly, Barry had an idea. Since they couldn't find a new member, he suggested recruiting Yoke back to Thunder Pike. Simon was confused by Barry's suggestion. Barry insisted that Yoke was better than everyone else. Simon agreed, remembering they never failed a quest with Yoke. Simon thought having Yoke around meant they wouldn't have to do errands themselves. However, he worried because Yoke left on his own. Barry assured Simon that Yoke would come back, citing money as the reason for his departure. Barry suggested raising Yoke's salary, convinced it would bring him back. Simon knew Yoke wouldn't build credibility by sticking with low-ranked quests. Despite this, Simon agreed to compromise for Yoke and supported Barry's idea. Simon recalled Yoke's dream of reaching the Abyss Gate, requiring permission from the Adventurers Guild, the government, and being in an A-ranked party. Simon felt embarrassed that Yoke left their qualified party because of money. Barry encouraged Simon to talk to Yoke when they met, and Simon repeated his willingness to compromise. They cheered, claiming they were being generous for Yoke. A few hours ago, the Clover Party faced off against a C-ranked demon beast named Lefty Hand. The hand monster launched magical attacks, but Yoke quickly stepped in, creating shields and protecting Marina, who was at the front. Silk enlisted the help of the Dryads to restrain the monster, allowing Rain to unleash a 4th grade spell known as Lightning. Despite their efforts, the monster proved resilient. Recognizing the need for a stronger move, Yoke employed the trusty Scroll of Rockbreak. Spikes of hardened earth shot through the hand monster, causing it to crash to the ground with a loud thud. The team celebrated their success, having defeated the monster, and Yoke concluded the live broadcast. With the quest accomplished, they made their way back to the guild. A month had passed since Clover was founded. Despite facing challenges, the girls had improved through their experiences. Carrying their dreams, they tirelessly worked on their skills, guided by Yoke. Each girl became stronger in her own expertise and roles. When they returned to the guild one night, Marina wondered if Mamar was still there. Yoke questioned her interest, and Marina explained that Yoke seemed close to Mamar. Yoke shared that Mamar had been a great help when he was a newbie adventurer. He described Mamar as the most senior staff in the guild, once known as the Grey Hermit and the strongest among the previous generation of adventurers. Rain teased Marina about being jealous, but she denied it. Silk reminded everyone to focus on counting their adventurer credits and suggested they spend the night drinking together. As they talked, someone approached and greeted Yoke. Yoke instructed the girls to report to the receptionist first. Though worried, they hurried off as Yoke asked Simon what he wanted to discuss. Simon haughtily smiled, indicating he had something to talk about. He had invited Yoke to grab a drink and chat with Barry at their table. Yoke sighed, saying he was tired from dungeon exploring. Simon stopped him, saying he had a good deal that could help Yoke. Our main character scolded his childhood friend, warning him about scams. Simon told him to stop lecturing, which angered Yoke. Simon bragged and blamed Yoke for not listening. Yoke remembered how Simon always made himself the hero of his stories. Yoke tried to excuse himself, but Simon grabbed his shoulder, insisting he go back to Thunder Pike. He said Yoke might miss a good deal and offered to solve money problems. Yoke got mad at Simon's nonsense. He agreed that money was part of why he left, but said the main reason was that they thought the Abyss Gate was nonsense. Plus, he was now part of Clover, a group with similar dreams. Yoke declared he was the leader of Clover and couldn't return to Thunder Pike. Simon got upset, questioning Yoke's attitude. Yoke claimed he was being neutral and reminded Simon that he agreed to him leaving Thunder Pike since they saw him as useless. Simon said they should act like adults and have common sense. Yoke wondered what trouble he caused for Simon to act petty. Simon said they'd been failing quests since Yoke left. Yoke told him to recruit new members as he was treated like baggage. Simon said Yoke was being exploited by his current party, calling the girls shameless for their low credibility. For the first time, Yoke glared angrily at Simon, who was flustered. Yoke corrected him, saying Simon and his teammates were the ones exploiting him before. He wondered who the real shameless inferiors were. Yoke made it clear he wouldn't return to Thunder Pike and asked Simon to leave his current party. Yoke said his goodbyes and left. Simon claimed Yoke would regret his decision and left with Barry. Yoke rejoined the girls, and Marina began to wonder if Simon was someone from Yoke's past gatherings. Yoke assumed the girls had overheard everything and said sorry for the disturbance. Marina suddenly hugged Yoke and inquired if he would go back to Thunder Pike. Yoke already knew she had heard him mention it to Simon. Marina asked again, her concerns more evident in her eyes. Yoke apologized for causing her worry and assured her that he wanted to be with her for as long as possible. The girls blushed upon hearing Yoke's words, which seemed like a proposal. Yoke tried to clarify that it wasn't a proposal, but Silk reminded him that polygamy was accepted in their country. Another day dawned for the Clover Party, and an elderly man resembling the owner of KFC joined them. Despite appearances, he wasn't a fast food chain owner but a realtor ready to help the girls find their dream headquarters. Onlookers observed as they strolled through the streets. Monday, the old man felt honored to be chosen by a rapidly growing party. Yoke was pleased with their growing fame, but the intense gazes from men bothered him. Understandably, he was in the company of 3 beautiful girls. Silk expressed gratitude that Yoke accompanied them, though Yoke didn't mind it. Yoke admired Silk for connecting with a friendly real estate agent, and Silk mentioned consulting with Mamar. She wondered if Yoke also had knowledge about real estate. Yoke casually mentioned that a support member should have some knowledge about it too. The Monday real estate agency used to be well known, had a strong reputation, and had close ties to the guild. On that Monday, they introduced the first house, a bungalow close to the guild, market, and trading centers. The girls were impressed because it was newly built. However, Yoke noticed some shortcomings, particularly regarding security. He explained that bungalows are easy targets for theft, especially for women living in them. Monday was impressed by Yoke's knowledge, and Marina loudly supported his insights. Even though the house was great, the Clover Party decided to check out the next one. They soon arrived at a huge renovated apartment building with shared spaces and individual rooms. Yoke was impressed to see underground storage and a terrace. Despite being far from the guild, Yoke told the girls that the place was great, and they all unanimously agreed. Monday then suggested checking out the third house since it was considered better than the apartment type. On their way, Marina got excited, but Rain noticed that Yoke seemed uncomfortable. He mentioned that Thunder Pike's base was in the neighborhood. Hearing this, Silk suggested canceling the trip to the third house, expressing her reluctance to have neighbors like the Thunder Pike Party. She assured Yoke that she wouldn't let them get close to him, causing our protagonist to blush. The other girls agreed with Silk's decision, and they signed the property deed. They celebrated, finally realizing one of their dreams, and Yoke congratulated them. He was pleased that the 3 girls would now live in a safe place, which left them puzzled. Silk explained to Yoke that it was their party's base, meaning that Yoke would also be moving in. Everyone fell silent, continuing to be confused. Yoke had asked again if it was him and them living together. Silk then corrected him, saying that they lived together as members of the Clover Party. Yoke claimed he was happy to be treated as an equal, but he was a man. With teary eyes, Marina asked if Yoke didn't want to live with them. Flustered, Yoke claimed it would be fun living with the girls, causing the girls to have different expressions. The girls threw more logical reasons on why Yoke needed to stay with them, especially if the girls were left all alone. In the end, Yoke agreed, making the girls victorious. Still, Yoke suggested putting locks on every room. The girls looked at each other and agreed since they knew what Yoke meant. Silk then decided to contact the moving agency so they could have an early celebration. In the past few days, Yoke and the girls brought in some furniture and set up the kitchen for a nice meal. Yoke even gave the girls a mirror that could show live adventure broadcasts. The girls were happy to have Yoke with them. Later, Yoke went to his bed and felt proud of his disciples. He was grateful to have his own room because he used to rent rooms before that. While thinking about buying supplies for the next day, someone knocked on his door. Rain showed up in her casual sleepwear, and Yoke felt a bit flustered seeing her in a vulnerable state. Rain asked Yoke for a favor. Yoke was taken aback by Rain not acting like her usual self. She then mentioned how Yoke didn't add a lock to his door despite telling the girls to do it. Sitting on Yoke's bed, she asked him for a favor, making Yoke feel flustered due to Rain's assertiveness. The following day, Yoke and Rain visited the marketplace, where numerous magical items were on display. Yoke had grasped Rain's words from the previous night. Seeing Rain in casual attire, Yoke couldn't help but find Rain incredibly cute. Rain, curious about what was amiss, asked Yoke, who mentioned noticing how well-dressed Rain was. Flustered, Rain explained it was their first time going out alone together. Feeling unsure, Rain thought she might have made a mistake since it was her first time hanging out with a boy. She worried if she looked strange. Yoke, caught off guard, remained silent, making Rain uneasy due to his lack of response. Rain apologized and attempted to walk away, but Yoke asked her to wait and took hold of her hand. Time seemed to stand still for Rain, who blushed intensely. The two had restarted the awkward silence from earlier. Rain felt flustered when she realized she was holding Yoke's hand. She was surprised when Yoke pointed it out and said she didn't look weird but cute instead. The sudden compliment caught Rain off guard and she couldn't help but blush. Yoke then asked what Rain had been searching for. Rain admitted she hadn't come out to find something specific. She just wanted to spend time alone with Yoke. Feeling flustered, Yoke suggested moving on. However, they fell into another awkward silence until Rain giggled, realizing she had made things awkward. The two laughed it off and decided to casually wander around the market. Rain had wondered if Yoke was accustomed to visiting the shops. Yoke admitted that although many items seemed unimpressive, they often turned out to be surprisingly practical. Rain understood that Yoke possessed the ability to repair broken items as he was an alchemist. Yoke then shared that, with luck, he could even discover artifacts from labyrinths. Upon hearing this, Rain pondered if they might come across something that could enhance her magic sense. The two wandered around the marketplace, exploring various products while avoiding sketchy ones. Yoke felt happy seeing Rain enjoying the item they had just bought. However, he had noticed Rain acting strangely since the night before. Putting the pieces together, Yoke questioned Rain about whether there was something she needed to share with him. Rain became silent for a moment and then asked if Yoke was considering returning to his previous party. The atmosphere turned serious as they both fell silent again. Rain acknowledged Yoke's skills as an adventurer and suggested that he should pursue his dream with the A-ranked party instead of sticking with them. She felt that Yoke was wasting his talents with their group and apologized. At first, Yoke couldn't find the words to respond. He reminded Rain of the promise they made with the other two girls to reach the end of the Abyss Gate. Despite his initial hesitation, Yoke expressed his happiness that the girls supported the dream that his previous party had dismissed as ridiculous. He genuinely wanted to stay with them, and asked Rain not to distance herself from him. Rain's mood shifted, and she appeared more relaxed. The two then headed home together. At that moment, a man accidentally bumped into Rain, causing her to drop the magic item she had just purchased. A thief quickly seized the opportunity, snatching the item and making a hasty escape, laughing all the way. Rain, lacking her usual mace, attempted to fight back, but it proved challenging. Yoke, eager to catch the thief, faced unexpected obstacles as the street suddenly became crowded. Fearing he might lose sight of the thief, a girl passing by assured him she would handle the situation. This girl with animal ears skillfully navigated through the crowd with impressive agility. Rain and Yoke were amazed, barely hearing her footsteps as she ran. Observing her attire and abilities, Yoke assumed she was a seasoned adventurer. The girl successfully apprehended the thief and demanded that he return what he had stolen. The guards thanked the girl, and Yoke and Rain did the same shortly after. The girl seemed surprised by the gratitude, insisting it was nothing. She felt a bit awkward receiving sincere thanks. Despite her reassurance, Yoke and Rain were more focused on her cat ears. Yoke recognized her as a Furchi, a race known for keen senses suitable for scouts and hunters. However, he noticed that her skills went beyond her race's natural abilities. The girl then admitted that she always cared about other people's business, especially if a little girl was in trouble. Rain felt a pang of hurt upon hearing this. The girl, unaware of Rain's feelings, speculated whether Rain was Yoke's little sister, inadvertently causing more emotional distress. It wasn't long before the girl realized her mistake and apologized. She then assumed that Rain was Yoke's girlfriend, leading to a wide smile on Rain's face. Yoke attempted to deny the catgirl's assumption, but Rain intervened and stopped him. The catgirl had claimed she wanted to do something and invited Rain to join her. She noticed Rain's hair had come untied and fixed it, suggesting that Rain should have a lovely hairstyle for their date. Rain thanked her and smiled sweetly. The two continued chatting, and Yoke was impressed that the catgirl easily made friends with the shy Rain. Yoke realized that the Clover party didn't have a scout yet and hoped the catgirl could join them. Despite assuming she already had a party, Yoke wanted to invite her but needed to talk to his girls first. Suddenly, the catgirl called out to Yoke and asked if Rain looked cute with her new hairstyle. Yoke was stunned and admitted that Rain did look cute. The catgirl teased the two, noticing their shyness and red faces. Yoke then invited the catgirl to a meal as a thank you, but she didn't want to ruin their date. All of a sudden, the catgirl got really scared when she remembered something. She started to panic, saying she was in big trouble. In a haste, she said goodbye and left Yoke and Rain. Rain thought that the catgirl might be working for someone strict and scary. She smiled and said she had a feeling they would meet again. Yoke was surprised and watched the catgirl run away. He also had the same feeling. A week later, Yoke and the girls arrived at a dungeon. Yoke checked on how they were doing. All three girls were now wearing new gear that made them look even better. Yoke thought this was the kind of quality he expected from Earthies, a well-known workshop. He then told the girls to go on their first mission as a team. The Earthies workshop hired Quattro to explore a dungeon and come back. Quattro was far from Finis, where Yoke and the girls came from. They had to go through a nearby dungeon named Eon all the way up to the 4th floor. When they finished Eon, they would find a path leading to another dungeon called Odred. That would be the end of their journey. Yoke wasn't worried because Eon wasn't challenging and they had efficient equipment with them. Even though they got the equipment for free, Yoke reminded the girls to be careful with it, emphasizing that it would be featured in advertisements. This left Marina confused as Yoke had already explained this to them before. He clarified that their footage in the dungeon would be used to promote Earthy's new products. Marina, feeling unprepared because she hadn't done her skincare routine, started to freak out. Yoke reassured her that she didn't need to worry because her skin and hair were beautiful as they were. As Marina was getting anxious, Silk wondered if they could successfully pull off the task. Yoke assured Silk that no one could wear the equipment better than her. Meanwhile, Rain observed the situation, feeling embarrassed for the other girls. Yoke then called Rain, but instead of complimenting her, he gave instructions on how to make their video more eye-catching. Rain silently pouted, and Yoke wondered what was bothering her. Silk intervened, asking Yoke about Rain's appearance in her new outfit. Observing the accessories and ribbons, Yoke casually described Rain as cute. This caused Rain to feel embarrassed, and the other girls scolded Yoke for being too much. Once the girls received lots of compliments, they went ahead and got to the dungeon, which looked really nice on the inside. Yoke then told them where the staircases were on each floor. Because there was a gap between the floors, Marina said they could use a rope to climb down. Yoke tossed a rock into the gap, but it vanished when a shadowy figure grabbed it. Yoke explained that even though it seemed straight, the floors got twisted when the place turned into a maze. He warned the girls to be cautious and assured them that things would go smoothly if they avoided falling. Silk had wondered if there were any floor bosses. Yoke began telling a frightening tale about a floor boss from a distant past. Holding his lantern, he described a shadowy humanoid boss with glowing eyes that protected treasures from intruders. Moreover, this mysterious boss monster used dark magic. The use of such magic was prohibited due to its ability to cause pain, awaken the dead, and spread unhappiness. Learning or using it was banned because it involved tapping into the power of evil gods. Yoke had warned the girls to be careful, cautioning them about the dangers of being dragged into the world of the dead. However, he couldn't resist teasing them, pretending that a monster lurked behind them. Startled, the girls rushed over and hugged Yoke. While Marina appeared genuinely scared, Silk seized the opportunity to play along. In the process, Yoke ended up being pushed to the ground, where he quickly apologized for the scare, assuring them it was just a joke. In Yoke's story, the monster he mentioned was the Shadow Stalker, a creature that hadn't been seen in 10 years. This information made Marina feel more at ease, thinking the quest might be easier than expected. With GoPro-kun tagging along, they continued their adventure. Little did they know, a pair of bright eyes observed them from the shadows. The Clover Party had been exploring the labyrinth for a while now, encountering traps, battling easy monsters, and stumbling upon a magical bag that caught Rain's interest. They were nearing the staircase to the next floor, looking forward to another delicious lunch prepared by Yoke. Excitement filled the air. However, Yoke noticed something off about Silk. Silk mentioned detecting a strange smell ahead. Yoke, sensing danger, immediately instructed the girls to step back. Without warning, a powerful attack narrowly missed them. Out of nowhere, a group of orcs appeared, leaving Yoke puzzled about why such creatures were in that area. Silk, looking at the orcs with disdain, seemed to have a particular reason for her disgust. The orcs used to live up north and treated intelligent races as food, wrecking an ancient elven kingdom named Sandrion. Ever since that event, elves despised orcs as their sworn enemies. Yoke remembered that orcs were a military race, sorting themselves purely based on strength. Seeing the orcs in front of them without items, Yoke assumed they were low-ranked. However, orcs were sly and relied on numbers. When Marina attacked the orcs, they ignored her and headed towards Silk. Swiftly, Silk used a scroll of light shield. Yoke was confident that his team could handle the orcs with ease. Silk then sought the help of dryads and pushed the orcs to the edge of the floor. The orcs were surprised, and Yoke couldn't help but smirk. With the dryads around, the orcs couldn't move. Silk instructed Marina and Rain to attack. Rain cast a Tier 4 spell, Fireball. The massive ball of fire was hurled toward the orcs. Yoke then told Marina that there were 2 more left, and she quickly jumped in to slice the remaining orcs in half as Yoke cast debuffs on them. Yoke had been impressed with how composed and collected Silk seemed, thinking she might become the leader in the future. While Marina was celebrating their victory, Yoke took a moment to check on Silk and see if she was okay. Silk mentioned that she wanted to give herself credit for staying calm during the situation. Yoke praised her, calling her reliable, and Silk chuckled, half expecting Yoke not to acknowledge her by her race. She then reminded him that dark elves were considered traitors by elves, stemming from a rumor that they were once part of the elf population during the war with orcs, but turned into a dark army. Yoke was a bit surprised but wondered if orcs could really distinguish the difference. With a smile, he dismissed it as a superstition, and Silk agreed, thanking him. Just then, Marina approached, holding a scroll that they had obtained from the orcs. Upon checking, Yoke had claimed that it was the letter of revelation that could awaken the power of grace deep within. essentially an important item. He assumed that the orcs had looted it from dungeons or deceased individuals. However, it was not an item that was supposed to appear in Aeon. Marina wondered if it was from Odred, and Yoke agreed. Despite the absence of floor bosses in Aeon, Yoke wondered why orcs would venture deep into the labyrinth and why they had come in the first place. Yoke knew that orcs were a looting race that targeted lower floors of high-level labyrinths. As they pondered what caused the orcs to appear in Aeon, Yoke assumed that something had chased them, and that they were threatened by something. Yoke used Zarnag as an example, leading Rain to assume that it could be a demon beast. While Yoke attempted to deny that assumption, Marina suddenly turned pale and told Yoke to look behind him. Yoke then turned around and his eyes widened. A shadow in a human shape with bright eyes appeared. Yoke had warned the girls to be cautious because the monster known as Shadowstalker hadn't been seen for over 10 years. Suddenly, the Shadowstalker spoke up and revealed itself to be a recorded mysterious being. Everyone was surprised, and the Shadowstalker simply disappeared into the darkness. Yoke, seeing it escape, debated whether they should pursue it or ignore it. As they were near the staircase considered a safe area, Silk suggested ignoring the Shadowstalker. Marina agreed, not sensing any hostility from the shadow monster. However, Rain thought it would be better to catch it to gather more information about the monster. Despite Rain's suggestion, Yoke decided to follow the majority and ignore it, but they still needed to be cautious because it was an undead type of monster. Marina was surprised to learn that the Shadowstalker was undead, and Yoke explained that some undead monsters had intelligence and could attack at any time. Yoke reminded the girls to be careful against dark magic, especially curses that could only be broken by killing the caster. However, some curses had different conditions. They would only disappear when certain conditions were met or end, and in the worst case, they could last until the victim died. Silk found it absurd, and Yoke explained that using dark magic also had a price to pay. Even holy magic like purification of the undead wasn't enough to defeat them unless weakened. Yoke reminded them to be careful and to use holy water while moving to the next floor. The group reached the staircase and had lunch. Marina wondered why monsters didn't appear on the stairs. Yoke explained that it was one of the many mysteries of labyrinth dungeons. He gave an example of a monster born from the labyrinth's magic power, which explained why they stayed in one area. Yoke shared his idea that each floor represented different worlds and showed the girls an illustration. The girls assumed that this was why the Shadowstalker couldn't approach them. Yoke advised them to relax and get ready. However, he couldn't shake off the memory of weird events, including the appearance of the Shadowstalker. He thought about worse things that could happen but felt it was too early to dwell on them. Yoke wondered if there were still monsters on the way. Soon after, Yoke and the girls reached the 4th floor and found it to be very dark. Yoke then asked Silk to seek help from the spirits of darkness. However, Silk noticed something above them. The Shadowstalker from earlier was staring at them intently. Yoke reassured them about its position, but then he noticed Rain suddenly stop breathing. Yoke realized that the Shadowstalker was using a magic that could penetrate walls. Yoke used a spell called Awakening to revive Rain. While moving away, Yoke noticed that the monster was using dark magic. Suddenly, Yoke was hit by a powerful curse spell and felt its strength. He fell on Rain's shoulder and the girls saw him losing consciousness. As he realized he was passing out, Yoke told the girls to run away before it was too late. The monster in front of them was essentially a demon that foretold someone's death. The Shadowstalker passed through the floor, which was supposed to be impossible, surprising the girls. Seeing Rain trying to wake up Yoke, Silk reminded the girls about what their master had told them regarding curses, to kill the caster of the curse. The girls decided to take down the Shadowstalker together. The Shadowstalker had smirked at the girls. Silk told the others to weaken it first and hide their master behind the wall. She asked Marina to keep attacking and Marina charged forward while Rain carried Yoke to the side. Marina began attacking the Shadowstalker relentlessly, not giving it a chance to cast another spell. It tried to escape, but Silk enlisted the help of the Dryads to attack it. However, the monster easily dodged everything. Rain confirmed that Yoke was in a safe place, and Silk used the power of the Wood Spirit to protect their master. While Rain was chanting a spell, Silk noticed that the Shadowstalker was only making fun of them. Angered, Rain then unleashed a 4th-tier magic called Water Inversion. The Shadowstalker dodged the attack, but Marina was hot on its tail. However, the monster evaded her strike and escaped to another floor. It continued mocking them and began chanting another spell. Worried, Silk told the girls to quickly hide. Just then, the monster swiftly disappeared into the darkness. Marina was surprised to see it vanish. Suddenly, she got attacked from behind, causing her blood to spurt. Silk instructed Rain to quickly heal Marina, who was still struggling against the attack. Marina claimed she couldn't see or hear anything. The girls were panicking since their master's life was at stake. Meanwhile, Yoke dreamed of something he recognized. It was his past, and we saw Yoke as a little boy. 2 adults, Yoke's guardian named Highness and his wife Irina, called him out, wondering why he seemed lost in thought. They asked Yoke if he was facing any troubles, and Yoke thanked them for their concern. As night fell, Yoke woke up because he needed to use the toilet. He discovered that his uncle and aunt were still awake, discussing Yoke's condition after surviving a monster attack. Unfortunately, his hometown had been attacked and even his parents were no longer there for him. The two guardians were worried for Yoke, and our protagonist sat on the staircase listening to his aunt cry with sympathy. Suddenly, the wind blew strongly. The two adults noticed it was snowing, unusual for the summer season. They sensed that something was amiss and familiar. Yoke rushed to the door, opened it, and called out for his father. Outside, a black-haired man appeared riding a huge wolf beast. Yoke's aunt asked the man to appear more normally next time, and he apologized, claiming it was a habit. The man landed on the ground and thanked the wolf named Celsius for the ride. The creature then flew away into the night sky. Yoke, surprised, asked his father about the wolf. Sage Feldio, an A-ranked adventurer and leader of the legendary group Anubis, wondered how Yoke was doing. He picked up his son and explained that the wolf was the spirit of water. Yoke wondered if it was his pet, and Sage expected Yoke to grow up amazing for calling a spirit a pet. Just then, Irina questioned why Sage caused a blizzard in the middle of the night. Sage explained that he had planned to go home early, but some things happened, so he asked Celsius for a ride to meet everyone. Irina couldn't believe that the unkempt man in front of them was the legendary leader of Anubis, who had overcome the labyrinth called Colorless Night. Irina asked Sage to have more dignity, but Sage claimed it was all about strength. Irina then called her brother a scammer. Saga and Yoke raced to Yoke's room to share more about his adventures. In Yoke's room, Saga said he had seen the edge of the world and described it as a beautiful place. Yoke happily listened to Saga's stories with sparkling eyes. Yoke praised his father, calling him awesome. Saga then mentioned that he would be leaving again in 2 days. Playfully, Saga pretended to feel shy about Yoke being sad, but Yoke insisted he wasn't sad. Saga wondered how Yoke was doing in the village, and Yoke assured him that he was getting along well with everyone, despite Simon causing some trouble. Still, Yoke missed his old house. While gazing at his son, Saga asked Yoke if he wanted to be an adventurer. Although Yoke acknowledged the danger, Saga sensed that it was what Yoke truly desired. He encouraged Yoke to be honest and explained that adventurers were free people who could rely on themselves. Even if everything familiar was gone, hometown, home, dreams, purpose, friends, and family, they could create a place they wanted to return to. Feeling determined, Yoke clenched his fist and admitted that he really wanted to be an adventurer. In response, Saga decided to train Yoke and asked him to address him as master. While Yoke dreamt about his past, the battle against the Shadow Stalker raged on. Marina was thrown against a wall, suffering severe injuries, but she bravely got back up to continue the fight. Rain and Silk, exhausted, supported Marina from the rear. Marina realized that the Shadow Stalker was toying with them, and panicked as the enemy vanished from sight. Worries about their master's safety intensified. Silk suddenly instructed Marina to give it her all. Marina, confirming the plan, asked Rain to unleash her most powerful Great Wind spell, providing an opening for Marina to attack. She declared that this was their chance to counterattack. Silk had a realization when they first encountered the Shadow Stalker. Understanding its limitations was crucial for success. Knowing its appearance meant victory. Silk instructed Rain to use her spell to cover a large area. After drinking a mana potion, Rain cast Great Wind to unveil the monster's location. Marina was then tasked with finding the Shadow Stalker, as the hurricane weakened its invisibility magic. Despite Marina's efforts, the monster remained elusive. Silk, not giving up, utilized something with the help of the Dryads. Trees sprouted and leaves combined with the hurricane, revealing the target. Marina charged toward it, determined for victory. However, when she swung her sword, the Shadow Stalker smirked and countered with a hurricane spell using dark magic, causing injuries. Silk, shocked that Marina's attack was repelled, saw the monster seizing the opportunity to finish Marina off. Fortunately, a tree branch intervened, causing the Shadow Stalker to retreat to another floor. Silk rushed to Marina's side. Realizing that the Shadow Stalker had merely been toying with them, Silk became serious. The girls trembled as they saw the dark magic cannon creating orbs above them. Unable to move, they watched helplessly as the dark magic balls surged towards them. Rain had cast a barrier to block the Shadow Stalker's attack. Silk saw that they were safe, but she noticed something and jumped to shield Marina. She took a hit that got through the barrier and fell to the ground. Marina panicked, and even Rain got distracted. The Shadow Stalker seized this opportunity to attack Rain. At the same time, a young Yoke sensed that something was wrong. Saga asked what was the matter, and Yoke said he felt a bad omen in his heart and had to leave. Saga was relieved that Yoke had noticed and told him he wanted his dream to change. He asked Yoke to remember his true self. Yoke transformed back into his adult self and realized he was in his second hometown. Saga explained that the Saga he saw was not real. It was an image created in Yoke's dream world. Yoke had subconsciously called for help, and Saga was there to assist. Yoke recalled encountering the Shadow Stalker and grew serious. realizing that the three girls were left alone, battling the dangerous monster. Saga urged Yoke to find a way out of the dream or risk dying, along with the girls in the real world. Back in Eon, Marina gasped for air in panic. She saw Silk and Rain lying in their own blood. Desperation filled Marina as tears welled up in her eyes. The laugh of the Shadow Stalker echoed through the labyrinth's floor. Marina knew everyone was exhausted and the monster's next attack could be fatal. Marina fell to the ground, realizing she couldn't move anymore. Apologetic thoughts overwhelmed her as she felt she had wasted the chance given by the others. Tears streamed down her face as she apologized. Suddenly, she heard rustling and saw Silk getting up. Marina's eyes widened as she witnessed Silk looking different, surrounded by mana. Silk remembers when her own kind labeled her a traitor among elves. Fortunately, she found companions and a master who didn't mind such judgments. Frustrated, Silk declared that she wouldn't let anyone take away her precious friends. Despite bleeding heavily and Marina's warnings, Silk kept walking forward. She sensed the connection between her body and soul weakening, allowing her to feel the mana around her more keenly. She realized she was tapping into the true power of the Dark Elves. Her resentment fueled her magic and she could easily sense the refined mana around her. With a single glance, Silk located the Shadow Stalker and used the Drades to attack it. Despite its attempts to dodge, the Shadow Stalker was still found. Marina couldn't believe what was happening, especially seeing Silk's eyes sparkling like amber. Marina trembled as she got back up, feeling the healing energy. Rain still managed to cast a healing spell. Silk had no trouble talking with the Dryads anymore, and her attacks became quicker, stronger, and more agile. Marina, feeling confident, charged ahead, confident that she could now defeat the monster effortlessly. Silk in turn enlisted the help of the Dryads to ensnare the Shadow Stalker while Marina leaped in for an attack. Marina successfully slashed the Shadow Stalker for the first time, causing the creature to collapse to the ground. Relieved, Silk dropped to the ground, exhausted from her efforts. However, to their dismay, the Shadow Stalker was not yet defeated and launched a counterattack on Marina. Silk, panicking, realized she had lost her connection with the Dryads. Just as Marina was about to be in real danger, a Scroll of Life Shield kicked in and saved her. The girls quickly figured out that it was Yoke who activated it after waking up from a dream. Yoke, visibly exhausted, stood up, and when the girls asked if he was okay, he assured them he was fine. Despite his claim, Marina couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off with Yoke. The Shadow Stalker attempted to attack Yoke, but he skillfully did himself. Yoke, now angered, unleashed a powerful spell against the Shadow Stalker, giving the girls a sense of unease. To be precise, Yoke cast 1,000 spells of snares on the Shadow Stalker, causing the creature to stumble around like a clumsy person. Adding to the onslaught, Yoke simultaneously cast 6 debuff spells, and even utilized a Scroll of Rock Blast and Gravity. Witnessing the once menacing Shadow Stalker reduced to a sorry state left the girls utterly speechless. Yoke confidently stated that his attacks were effective, crediting his girls for weakening the monster. He even taunted the monster, telling it to endure the consequences. Yoke had casually healed the girls. He clenched his fist and attempted to apologize to them. Silk stopped him, saying that the fight hadn't ended. Despite appearing injured, the Shadow Stalker got back up, and Silk could see that it was preparing to attack again. It seemed to be gathering a large amount of mana on its body, signaling a plan to self-destruct. Silk told Yoke to weaken the monster while Marina and Rain would deliver the final blows. Marina decided to showcase her special attack, and Rain planned to make things painful for the monster. Yoke cast more weakening magic. Silk used a 4th tier spirit magic named Iron Maiden. Marina employed a magic sword technique called Void Edge, and Rain utilized a 4th tier magic called Turn Undead. The trapped Shadow Stalker exploded, and Silk mentioned that she couldn't sense its mana anymore. She exclaimed that their mission had been completed. Suddenly, Yoke quietly hugged the girls. The girls began to panic as they were embraced by his arms. Yoke apologized to them and felt relieved that they were safe. He assured them that nothing was more valuable to him than all of them, and he reminded them to run if he instructed them to do so, as he didn't want them to get hurt. Silk playfully pinched Yoke's cheek and advised her master not to always sacrifice himself. She couldn't believe that Yoke was trying to avoid his role as a supporter. Silk claimed that though they might seem unreliable now, they would surely become reliable adventurers in the future, worthy of being by Yoke's side. She asked Yoke to support them without spoiling them. Marina and Rain agreed to fight together and vowed to always stay together. Yoke then remembered Saga telling him that adventurers were free. As he thought about losing his hometown, he hugged the girls who had become precious to him. Yoke expressed his love for them. Silk and Rain blushed and acted flustered, while Marina casually stated that she also loved Yoke. Yoke decided to create a place he could call home by himself. A couple of days passed, and Yoke along with the girls came back to the girl and told her about the Shadow Stalker. They hung around in Quattro for a bit and later headed to a meeting with a serious vibe. Present at the meeting were Benwood, who was the Guildmaster of Fines, a guy named Clive, who was the Guildmaster of Quattro, and Marquis Betty Boa, the president of the Royal Academy of Arts. Yoke and the others felt nervous encountering two guild masters and the person in charge of the aristocrats in the country. Yoke was especially concerned because Betty Boa seemed pretty proud. At that moment, Marina inquired of Yoke about the identity of the old man. Yoke, in turn, tried to explain things to Marina, who was completely unaware of the higher positions in the country. Upon learning that the person she had referred to as an old man held significance, Marina began to feel nervous, much like the others in the group. Betty then expressed his frustration, stating that they were wasting his time. He had come because he heard a C-ranked party had defeated the Shadow Stalker, and he couldn't believe someone uninformed had accomplished it. Marina apologized, but Betty corrected them, acknowledging their achievements. Yoke and the others expressed gratitude for his recognition. Benwood laughed, observing Betty's usual prideful demeanor, and praised the Clover Party. He went on to assert that the Shadow Stalker was a special monster, the same as Zarnag. The girls were surprised because they thought it was just a simple undead. Benwood heard that it could use dark magic, which was unusual. Without a doubt, it was considered an A-ranked monster. Benwood thought it was amazing that the three girls working together were able to defeat it. He also mentioned that it was the first time they had recorded a battle against an unknown monster. Clive thanked them for the sudden discovery, which led to the labyrinth being closed to prevent further losses. Betty said it was thanks to the Clover Party for quickly dealing with the problem. As a representative of the Royal Academy of Arts, the prideful Betty Boa praised the members of the Clover Party. He also promised to give them an award in addition to the compensation for completing the quest. He changed the topic and asked for Yoke's attention. He wondered if Yoke knew why someone great like him had come over personally to meet them. Yoke was impressed that the prideful Marquis also felt something was off. Yoke then explained, with a resolute expression, that the Shadow Stalker might be responsible for even more phenomena happening around. He claimed that the worst possible event would be the occurrence of a stampede. As a disclaimer, Yoke mentioned that his opinion was based on pure speculation and might be wrong. Betty was fine to hear anything since it was coming from someone who experienced the threat of the Shadow Stalker. Betty heard him clearly and thought his assumptions were true, making the atmosphere in the meeting room tense. At that moment, Marina asked about something called a stampede. Slick then scolded Marina. Yoke reminded her that he had already explained a strange rule in dungeons that stops monsters from leaving their assigned areas. When this rule is broken, monsters come out and people call it an overflow. If overflows happen from multiple dungeons at the same time, it's called a stampede. A stampede is dangerous for cities and villages. Yoke said his hometown, a big village, turned into ruins in just a few days due to a stampede. The girls were shocked to hear about Yoke's past, but their master used the story as an example. Suddenly, Marina felt upset. Benwood claimed that he started an investigation after the incident with Zarnag and discovered other strange occurrences. Yoke realized that their encounter with the Shadow Stalker was a result of an overflow. He thought that if it was Zarnag, monsters would have emerged from the dungeon. Silk stated that there wouldn't be a single soul left. The conversation became more intense for the girls. Betty reassured them, mentioning that their country had expertise in conquering dungeons and would confront any threat using the information they had gathered over the years. He urged the young people to follow him and stay calm. Yoke agreed, stating that a stampede was just a swarm of monsters and that there were various ways to deal with them. Betty was surprised, while Benwood just laughed it off. The girls also found Yoke amusing and giggled. Betty felt impressed when Yoke referred to a stampede as just a swarm of monsters. He was surprised to find that the Red Mage of Clover resembled his master. The girls were curious about this resemblance, and Betty wondered what the great mage Sage Ferdio was currently up to, surprising the girls even more. Yoke thought he had already shared about his master with the girls. Betty went on to explain why Yoke was close to Benwood and Mamar. They were former party members of Anubis, which Saga led as the leader. Benwood suddenly recalled someone saying hi to Yoke. The girls became excited upon learning that Yoke's master was the legendary adventurer. This caused a commotion, and Betty, annoyed by the noise, got upset. The girls apologized and the old men asked the members of Clover to leave them alone. Betty then suggested to the guildmasters that they should investigate further. Benwood wondered about Betty's thoughts after meeting Saga's disciple. Betty praised Yoke's knowledge and stated that he deserved to be remembered. He also claimed to have the image and name of the Red Mage from the Clover Party firmly in his mind. A month ago, Yoke was wrapping up his work in the middle of the night. He had planned to keep going with his holy water project when the girls burst into his room. Silk, looking a bit annoyed, complained about Yoke working too much. Yoke tried to explain that he would finish soon, but he got a bit flustered because the girls were wearing light night clothes. Silk kept scolding Yoke, but his attention was all over the place. Unsure of where to look, he covered his face and couldn't help but wonder what they were wearing. Silk told him not to change the subject and reminded him that they had been helping him with various things. Despite their assistance, Yoke was still sacrificing sleep by overworking. Yoke assured them he would get some rest as advised, but Silk didn't fully trust him. She then instructed Rain and Marina about their plan. The girls dragged Yoke onto his bed and they all lay down beside him. Yoke's mind tried to make sense of the situation but quickly became overwhelmed. Silk insisted that Yoke wouldn't sleep unless they surrounded him, wanting to bridge the gap he had created. Yoke realized this and apologized, asking Marina to move away because something was touching him. In response, Marina squeezed in, curious about what was touching him. In a moment of panic, Yoke turned his head to the right and accidentally bumped into Rain's face. The group, all around the same age, felt embarrassed. Yoke requested some alone time to sleep, but Silk scolded him instead, insisting it was impossible. Despite his protests, Silk ignored him and went to sleep. As the room grew quiet, Yoke was surprised to hear Marina snoring. Suddenly, Marina started nibbling on Yoke's ear. Yoke was shocked and wondered if Marina was just pretending. He quickly pulled his ear away, causing Rain to kiss Yoke's cheek. Flustered, Yoke apologized, but Rain was already knocked out from embarrassment. Silk had glared at Yoke for being too touchy with the other girls. Then she realized she had been hugging Yoke's arm the whole time and felt embarrassed. She stared at her master and started gently caressing Yoke's hand. Yoke was confused about what was happening until Silk locked their hands like lovers. Silk started giggling, and Yoke wondered if she was making fun of him. Silk claimed it was because Yoke wasn't sleeping yet, playfully teasing him, which made Yoke blush. He got mad at the defenseless girls and told them to be more careful, warning that there would be times when he couldn't hold himself back. Silk was surprised and asked Yoke if he meant something, but Yoke told her to sleep since she had told him to do the same. The night continued with Marina sleeping peacefully and Three Faces blushing. Morning came, and everyone looked sleep-deprived except for Marina. Meanwhile, in the underground canal of Murun, a group of familiar adventurers stayed in one of the small rooms with dry bread and jerky. Simon had asked the women to cook something, but Chimera said it was impossible because they didn't have many tools for cooking. Barry then mentioned Yoke, Simon's childhood friend, and Simon asked Barry not to bring up Yoke's name. Simon wondered if they still had enough potions, and Chimera explained that because of a certain someone, they only had a few left. Simon told Chimera that she was supposed to be restocking potions, and this reminded him of someone he didn't want to think about. With a sad expression, Jamie remembered how someone used to carry around ingredients, and cooking tools, and even buy consumables for the party with his own money. Simon interrupted her and asked if the broadcast was ready. Jamie said it would take a while, and Simon started teasing her, calling her a shabby magic user and errand girl. Chimera added that Jamie should at least do her part and quickly input something into the broadcast equipment. Jamie got flustered because the commands became messy. Chimera called her an idiot, assuming that it just needed simple magic. But Jamie explained that the equipment needed to be set up properly to avoid issues. Simon and Barry, unaware of the complexity, joined in calling Jamie an idiot when it came to magic, deeming her useless. Simon told her not to drag them down since they were only taking a simple request that had been exaggerated as a B rank. Simon considered the task of exterminating Bolguls, monkey-like monsters, as only a D rank quest. He criticized the one who rated the quest, calling them ignorant. Jamie wondered if there was a reason for the higher rank and reminded them about Yoke's warnings. Simon got mad and scolded Jamie while Barry laughed, dismissing Yoke's words as those of a coward. Simon proudly declared that an A rank like him would not fail a B rank quest. The Thunderpike Guild came back to the guild after a failed quest, looking all beaten up. The receptionist then suggested they take on lower ranked quests, but this made Simon really angry. He blamed the guild for not finding new members and for misjudging the quests, claiming there was a powerful monster they weren't told about. The receptionist reminded Simon that they'd been failing high-ranked quests, and if they kept it up, they'd lose their adventurer score and be demoted. She pointed out that their last quest was about investigating a canal, and the details mentioned that dealing with Bolguls could be tricky. She wondered if Simon's 5 years of experience meant nothing, as he didn't seem to understand the quest details. Simon got even angrier and continued blaming the receptionist for her attitude. He threatened to report her to her superiors, but the receptionist calmly told him to do as he pleased, and he stormed out of the reception area. The others in the guild worried about being demoted. While they were fretting, Simon heard a broadcast about the Clover Party. This just added to his frustration. The 3 girls from Clover appeared on the broadcast, and Simon's expression made it clear he was extremely angry, as if he wanted to hurt someone. The broadcaster said everyone knew about the Rising Party. Simon felt frustrated as he kept hearing about the Clover Party. The Clover Party was the big talk in town. The broadcasters then said that the next video from the Clover Party was about the Shadow Stalker, a weird rumor initially. Simon listened as they described the Shadow Stalker as a special monster, an A-rank one at that. The broadcasters thought Clover would soon be an A-ranked party, which shocked Simon. He couldn't understand why people considered such trash as special. The broadcast then showed a preview of the Clover Party's battle, featuring Yoke hugging 3 girls. Everyone was excited about this intense moment, but Barry remembered their plan to recruit Yoke back. Simon reassured them not to worry because he had a great idea. A few weeks later, a bird delivered mail to the Clover party's base. It slipped through the door while everyone was eating and watching a broadcast together. The bird landed on the table, catching everyone's attention. Yoke noticed the mail was addressed to him and read it. Seeing his expression, Rain wondered who the letter was from. Yoke then said it was from Simon on behalf of the guild. Marina thought Simon might be trying to recruit Yoke again, but Yoke chose to ignore the invitation. Just then, the broadcast announced that Simon's party was planning to investigate the Endless Darkness, which was Yoke's original target. Confused, Yoke decided to go to the guild to find out what was happening. Shortly after, he got the news from Mamar that Yoke had been nominated by Simon's party to join them in investigating the Endless Darkness. Mamar presented him with the documents. Yoke thought Simon was being impolite, leaving Marina puzzled. Yoke clarified that there was a one-time request a party could use to recruit someone temporarily if they lacked a specialist. However, it only applied to inactive individuals. Yoke, being an active member, found it rude in this context. He informed Mamar that he would decline the invitation, and Mamar agreed, acknowledging it was a reckless move. Despite Yoke's refusal, the Royal Academy was already seeking information on unusual events, and Simon might have exploited this opportunity to make a request. Yoke, understanding the situation, declined the offer for both his and Simon's benefit. Mamar, anticipating Yoke's decision, had already prepared a mailbird in advance, impressing Marina. The girls were aware of Yoke's inclination to accompany them into the Endless Darkness, supporting Mamar's foresight. Yoke was taken aback and, in a fluster, confirmed their expectations. At that moment, someone burst into the guild looking for Yoke. It was Simon, demanding an explanation about Yoke's refusal. Yoke had instructed the girls not to take any action and confronted Simon. He stated that it was unavoidable because he lacked interest in accompanying Thunder Pike to Endless Darkness. Yoke reminded Simon that recruiting someone from an active party was against the rules. Simon then referred to Clover as a mere C-ranked party, and emphasized that to explore the Endless Darkness, Yoke would need assistance from an A-ranked party like his. In frustration, Simon told Yoke to stop and warned him not to become arrogant just because he was surrounded by girls and a foolish audience. He criticized Yoke for using the girls to attract sponsors and for staging emotional performances in low-level dungeons just for attention. Simon pointed out that Yoke was essentially a useless person who only did odd jobs. Yoke later understood that Simon had been upset because he led a famous rising party, and was trying to convince Yoke to join back his party to make him feel insignificant again. Yoke called Simon shameless and pitiful for making groundless accusations due to jealousy. Simon argued that Yoke was mistaken, mentioning that he only earned a small amount from a lower-ranked party. He advised Yoke to pursue his dreams, but Yoke firmly declined. Yoke corrected him that even if Simon used the Abyss Gate as a justification, taking on the Endless Darkness was still a risky plan for someone like the Thunderpike party. Other adventurers had a good laugh when they found out about Thunderpike's true situation. Simon got angry and started accusing Yoke of making a fool out of him. Yoke calmly explained that it wasn't his intention and reminded Simon of his responsibilities as a leader to be prepared before entering a dungeon. Simon continued to blame Yoke for Thunderpike's repeated failures, but Yoke advised him not to shift the blame to someone else. He pointed out that he always calculated and warned Simon about the dangers, but Simon dismissed it as the talk of a coward. Yoke emphasized that, for an adventurer, knowledge was just as important as combat skills. He wanted Simon to realize this. Yoke ultimately highlighted that Thunderpike kept failing because Simon wasn't taking the job seriously and was underestimating the responsibilities. Simon had been puzzled by Yoke's incomprehensible talk. The other adventurers witnessing the drama had agreed with Yoke's words, labeling Simon as foolish and an irresponsible leader. They thought Simon was disgusting for recruiting someone from another party right in front of their current party members. They went on to criticize Simon, calling him childish and rotten. They pitied Simon for being clueless except for looking down on others. Despite Yoke's attempt to lecture him, Simon acted like a spoiled child, telling Yoke to be quiet and insisting that Yoke was the one in the wrong. Simon paused to catch his breath, only to hear someone else call him disgusting again, leaving him speechless. Yoke issued a final warning to Simon, advising him to forget about Endless Darkness and take a good look at himself. Yoke instructed the girls to leave and bid farewell to Mamar. Silently passing by Simon, Yoke exited the guild, leaving Simon feeling frustrated and humiliated. A few weeks later, Yoke and the girls returned to the guild. Mamar apologized for the sudden call. As Mamar guided them to the reception office, Marina wondered why they were called. Yoke thought it might be another request. Marina was relieved because she had expected them to be scolded for turning down a request the other day. They arrived at the office, and Yoke was surprised to see Marquis Betty chilling in the office waiting for them. Yoke wondered if Betty was upset about the declined request. Betty then started the meeting and asked Benwood to fetch something. He tossed it toward Yoke, and our protagonist realized it was a scroll of exit. Marina questioned what it was, and Yoke explained that it was a one-time use item to help adventurers exit a dungeon whenever they wanted. They wondered why Betty gave them such a precious item. Betty then announced that the Great Him had come to nominate a mission from the kingdom. He asked them to listen carefully. He wanted the Clover Party to investigate the endless darkness to help understand the cause behind the stampede. Everyone was shocked by the sudden bomb. Betty further discussed that the strange events happening lately were concentrated around endless darkness. They had already sent out 2 A-ranked parties, but they couldn't gather any solid information. He wanted information as soon as possible, and Betty trusted Yoke's discerning eyes and deduction capabilities. The girls were thrilled to get such a request because their master had finally taken a step toward his dream. However, Yoke stayed quiet about it until he asked the girls to withdraw from the request. He said they still didn't have enough strength and apologized, knowing he couldn't ensure the girls' safety in the risky dungeon. Betty then wondered what Yoke meant and told him to stop doubting himself. Ever since watching Yoke on broadcasts, Betty recognized Yoke's strength. He questioned if anyone else could perform multi-quick cast and create new spells using alchemy. Impressed by Yoke's vast knowledge, decision-making skills, intuition, and heart, Betty held high expectations for Yoke. Betty continued praising Yoke until Yoke became teary-eyed. Yoke believed he could handle things and return safely with the necessary information, stating that since Saga was gone, the country could only rely on him. The girls then encouraged Yoke to accept the request. Yoke thanked the girls and Betty. With a determined expression, Yoke agreed to the country's investigation request. Upon learning that Yoke was accepted, Mamar presented the details of the request, indicating that the Clover Party had been designated as an A-rank party for the quest. Marina assumed they would get to see the sealed object proving the existence of the Abyss Gate, an account of battles within the endless darkness left by the legendary Anubis Party. The girls eagerly read the book's contents. Meanwhile, Yoke, already familiar with the information, received a new set of documents, recent records gathered by 3 other parties over the past 2 weeks. According to Benwood, only his information was useful, while Thunder Pike's data was deemed entirely useless. Yoke wasn't surprised, having warned Simon about it earlier. Benwood asserted that Thunder Pike's standing would plummet, but Yoke doubted it. Benwood explained that Simon and the others had manipulated the weapons they used and spread rumors about Yoke joining them to attract sponsors. He reassured Yoke not to worry about them. Yoke had told the girls that collecting information was crucial, but he had a more urgent matter in mind. He considered bringing in a temporary member for support. Turning to Benwood, he requested finding a skilled scout. However, the guildmaster mentioned that the most capable scouts were already employed. In that moment, Mamar offered a solution. She suggested introducing a trainee, the daughter of an acquaintance who might be suitable. Yoke, feeling empathy for the scout, hesitated. Mamar sensed his concern and assured them all to meet up the next day at 9. The following day arrived, but it was already late. Mamar appeared visibly annoyed, causing Yoke to worry. Mamar then speculated that the scout might have encountered some trouble. Trying to calm everyone's nerves, she reassured Yoke and the girls that her protege was still capable. The girls, curious about the new member, wondered what they would be like. At that moment, a big, tipsy adventurer approached the girls, requesting them to pour him some drinks. Marina promptly said no, and the man became angry. He angrily flipped the table, causing the girls to quickly escape. Silk attempted to call for security, and just then, a familiar cat girl arrived, admitting she was late. Accidentally, she kicked the drunk man in the knee, rendering him unconscious. Rain recognized her. The cat girl started to panic. Yoke, drawn by the commotion, recognized her too. The cat girl was surprised by the coincidence, and Mamar, joining them, was pleased her protege had finally shown up. She declared that the cat girl was the person she was going to introduce. Thoughts about her varied among the members of the Clover Party. With a threatening vibe, Mamar questioned why the cat girl was late. The cat girl apologized profusely, but Mamar assured her the apologies weren't necessary directed at her. The cat girl then apologized to Yoke and the girls, introducing herself as Nene Sylfendal, a ninja. She vowed to demonstrate her usefulness and pleaded with them to hire her, explaining that Mamar would surely kill her otherwise. Yoke understood. Shortly after, Nene found herself pleasantly surprised when she was easily accepted without a formal interview. Yoke expressed trust in Mamar but wanted to verify something. He aimed to check their compatibility. Nene understood this as an opportunity for them to assess how well she could coordinate with the team. Without delay, Yoke and the girls departed for a dungeon. Upon their return to the abandoned mines, the group decided to have a rematch with the Steel Crab. Nene was curious about their intentions, and Yoke proceeded to share how he had defeated the boss monster in a single shot. Impressed, Nene praised his choice of the Steel Crab as a test and reaffirmed their common goal of defeating it. Offering to showcase her skills, Nene volunteered to guide them through the quickest route. During the journey, Nene efficiently alerted everyone to the trap positions with just a single glance. She explained that she relied on sounds and vibrations to detect hollow areas containing traps. As a scout, she believed it was crucial to possess knowledge about disabling traps and understanding their patterns. However, she admitted that she could only truly learn these skills by experiencing them firsthand in the dungeons. The group was genuinely impressed by Nene's skills and knowledge. Just then, Nene heard something approaching. However, the others couldn't hear anything. Nene said there were undead about 100 feet away. Everyone was impressed, especially Yoke. Nene wondered if they should avoid the fight. Yoke questioned if it was possible, and Nene said she knew a path to avoid unnecessary fights since she already memorized the dungeon. Yoke was impressed again. It didn't take them long to reach the boss room. Everyone from Claire started praising Nene, making her embarrassed. Yoke said she was amazingly talented and that facing the endless darkness should be easy as long as Nene was with them. Nene was glad to be useful. The girls then suggested not fighting the steel crab anymore, but Nene wanted to showcase her ninja skills. She explained how ninjas use jutsu taught to her by Mamar. Everyone found her cool and they decided to confront the steel crab. The rematch began and the steel crab quickly approached. Nene intercepted the monster, impressing Yoke with her speed. Nene created clones using jutsu by pulling strands of her hair. Yoke was amazed at how Nene distracted the monster. With her clones, Nene used a sword technique called Ripping Heaven Sky to slice off the steel crab's tough leg. Yoke found Nene's use of her clones impressive. A scout like Nene was powerful enough to take down the steel crab on her own. That is the end of the recap for now. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.